Top 60. Video 08. 6 Daily Habits That Keep Your Brain Sharp After 60. Part 1. Opening. The hook that stops the scroll. Imagine you've just run into an old friend, someone you haven't seen in years. You sit down for coffee, start chatting, and suddenly, you can't remember the name of the restaurant where you used to meet. You know that place. You spent decades going there. The name is right there on the tip of your tongue, but it just won't come out. You laugh. He laughs. But inside, a small, silent question arises in the back of your mind. Is this happening more often than it should? If you've ever experienced a moment like this, and I know you have, then you're in the right place. Because today, in this video, we're going to talk about something that most people aged 60 and over have never heard clearly enough. Your brain isn't destined to decline. It's waiting for you to wake it up. Researchers from Harvard University, the Mayo Clinic, and Stanford University have spent the last 3 decades studying a question that seemed impossible to answer. Is it possible to age without losing mental clarity? And the answer they found wasn't what most people expected. It wasn't a revolutionary drug. It wasn't an expensive surgery. It wasn't something available only to those with access to elite clinics in New York or Los Angeles. The answer lay in 6 simple habits repeated daily that the sharpest minds over 60 shared. 6 habits that modern neuroscience has managed to map, measure, and confirm, and that anyone can adopt, including you, starting today. But before I reveal each of these habits, let me ask you an important question. When was the last time you truly challenged your brain? I'm not talking about solving a work problem or managing household finances. I'm talking about a genuine challenge. Something new, something that took you out of your mental comfort zone, something your brain had to struggle a bit to process. For many of us, the honest answer is, it's been a long time, and that comes at a cost. A silent, gradual, almost imperceptible cost, until the day it becomes very noticeable. The technical name for this process is cognitive disuse, and neuroscientists have discovered that it can be reversed. Not completely, time doesn't go backward, but to a much greater degree than previously thought possible. A study published in the journal Neurology involving more than 2,800 participants over the age of 65, followed for 10 years, concluded that people who practiced specific cognitive habits in their daily lives showed rates of mental decline 32% lower than the control group. 32%. In 10 years of observation. Another study, this one from Rush University in Chicago, followed more than 900 elderly people and found that those with the healthiest brain habits had a cognitive age equivalent to 7.5 years younger than their chronological age. 7.5 years. That's no small amount of time. That's the difference between feeling lost and feeling present, between depending on someone and being independent, between living your life or just watching it pass by. And the most surprising thing? None of these habits require a luxury gym. None demand imported supplements. None need a special app or expensive equipment. Some of them you can start today the moment this video ends. But there's one detail that changes everything, and I'll reveal it in habit number 3. It's the habit that most people completely ignore, thinking it's nonsense. And it's precisely this one that neuroscience shows has the greatest impact on preserving memory after age 60. But to get there, you need to understand the first 2, because they create the foundation. Without them, habit 3 loses half its effectiveness. So stick with me. It's worth every minute. More than 1 million Americans over 60 have already discovered at least one of these habits. And those who have adopted all 6 have reported changes they describe with words like rebirth, clarity I haven't felt since my 40s, and my grandson asked me what I was taking because I looked younger than his mother. This isn't marketing. This is what neuroscience calls neuroplasticity, the ability of your brain to reorganize itself, create new connections, and function better when stimulated correctly. And today you're going to learn how to make that happen. Before we continue, if you haven't already subscribed to the Top 60 channel and activated the notification bell, do it now. Here we talk about real science, practical habits, and longevity with quality. No drama, no exaggeration, no empty promises. Only what works, only what research confirms, only what matters to those who have reached 60 and want to live the next 20-30 years with full lucidity. Very well. Now let's get to what you came for. Part 2, Habits 1 and 2, the rhythm and oxygen of the brain. Before I introduce Habit 1, I need you to understand something about how the brain ages, because this will change how you view these habits. When you were born, your brain had approximately 100 billion neurons. Throughout your life, you have lost some. This is natural, and it's far from the main problem. The real problem isn't the loss of neurons. It's the loss of connections between them. Imagine a city. The buildings are the neurons. The streets are the connections, what scientists call synapses. A city can have buildings standing, but if the streets are destroyed, nobody moves, no exchange happens, and the city stops. The same thing happens with the brain. What neuroscience has discovered is that the 6 habits we are going to present are, in practice, ways of building and maintaining these pathways, of creating new paths where the old ones have closed, of keeping the traffic flowing between the brain regions responsible for memory, reasoning, emotional balance, and decision-making. With that in mind, let's move on to Habit 1. Habit 1. Physical movement with cognitive intention. Habit 1 is what neuroscientists call the foundation of everything. Without it, the other 5 lose effectiveness. With it, the other 5 gain power. We're talking about physical movement, but not just any movement. The key is to move the body in a way that also challenges the brain at the same time. A landmark study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences followed 120 adults over 60 years of age for 1 year. Half took moderate walks 3 times a week. The other half did stretching exercises. At the end of the study, the walking group showed a 2% increase in hippocampal volume, the central brain region for the formation of new memories. The stretching group had a 1.4% reduction. 2% may not seem like much, but in brain terms, that's huge. The hippocampus normally shrinks by 1 to 2% per year after age 60. This group made it grow. But here's the detail that most articles forget to mention. It wasn't just any walk. It was a walk with cognitive intent. That means walking while actively observing the surrounding environment, noticing colors, sounds, shapes, taking a different route from time to time, stopping to identify a flower, a bird, an architectural detail. Why? Because when you combine physical movement with active sensory stimulation, 2 brain systems work simultaneously, and that creates far more new connections than simply walking while looking at the ground with headphones on. The same principle applies to dance. And here, researchers have found something fascinating. A study by Albert Einstein Medical Center in New York analyzed 469 adults over the age of 75 for 21 years, one of the longest longitudinal studies ever conducted on cognition and aging. They examined 11 different types of physical and cognitive activity, including reading, crossword puzzles, cycling, swimming, and dancing. The result that shocked researchers: ballroom dancing was the only physical activity that reduced the risk of dementia. Not just a little, it reduced it by 76%. 76%. More than any other physical or cognitive activity studied. Why dance? Because it combines everything the brain needs in a single moment. motor coordination, memorization of steps, social interaction, musical rhythm, and real-time decision-making. It's like a complete workout for the mind. But if dancing isn't for you, and that's okay, it doesn't have to be, the central principle is this: the most efficient movement for the brain is the one you do while also being mentally active. Walking and observing, swimming and counting strokes, gardening and identifying plants, bowling with friends and keeping score in your head. The science is clear: 30 minutes of intentional physical activity, at least 4 days a week, is enough to produce measurable changes in the brain in just 8 weeks. 8 weeks, 2 months. Think about it. Habit 2. Deep, restorative sleep, the brain cleaner. Now I want to introduce you to something that was discovered in 2013 and that completely changed the way neuroscience understands sleep. A discovery so surprising that the New York Times called it the most important scientific news of the decade. Researchers at the University of Rochester, led by Dr. Maiken Nedergaard, have discovered that the human brain has an internal cleaning system, which scientists have named the glymphatic system, and it only functions during deep sleep. During the night, while you sleep, cerebrospinal fluid actively flows through the spaces between brain cells, sweeping away toxins that have accumulated throughout the day. Among these toxins is the beta-amyloid protein, which is exactly what accumulates in the brains of people with Alzheimer's. In other words, deep sleep is like cleaning your brain. Without it, waste accumulates. And this accumulated waste over the years is one of the main triggers for cognitive decline. This explains something many of us notice but couldn't name: the feeling of mental fog after a bad night's sleep. That difficulty finding words, concentrating, remembering where you left your keys. This isn't an age thing. It's the glymphatic system that hasn't had time to work properly. And here's the specific problem that affects most people over 60. The quality of deep sleep naturally declines with age. The N3 sleep stage, the most restorative, progressively diminishes. This isn't inevitable, but it's common, and it can be reversed with the right habits. The protocol that sleep medicine specialists recommend for adults over 60 has 6 pillars: consistent sleep and wake times, even on weekends, a dark and cool bedroom between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, no screens, television, cell phone, tablet for at least 60 minutes before bedtime, no caffeine after 2 p.m., exposure to natural sunlight in the morning for at least 15 minutes to regulate the circadian rhythm, and a relaxation routine, which could be light reading, meditation, or a warm bath. An important detail: many Americans over 60 take medications that interfere with deep sleep: antihistamines, benzodiazepines, and some blood pressure medications. If you use any of these, talk to your doctor about the impact on your sleep, because sleeping superficially for years is a risk to the brain that doesn't show up in blood tests, but appears too late in cognition. The good news: studies show that improving sleep quality by just 30 to 45 minutes per night, not necessarily sleeping more, but sleeping better, produces measurable improvement in short-term memory in just 4 weeks. For weeks, 1 month, and you start to notice the difference in your ability to remember names, conversations, appointments, even before the first month is over. These first 2 habits, intentional movement and restorative sleep, are the foundation. They are the bedrock upon which the next 4 habits are built. And the next one is the one I mentioned at the beginning, the one most people ignore, but which neuroscience points to as having the greatest individual impact. Part 3. The habit most people ignore: deep social connection. We've arrived at habit 3, and I know that when you hear the name, part of you will think, is that it? Seriously? But stick with me because the numbers behind it will surprise you. Habit 3 is deep and regular social connection. We're not talking about following someone on Instagram. We're not talking about saying good morning to your neighbor. We're talking about real, sustained, emotionally meaningful human connections where you are seen, heard, and where you also see and hear the other person. In 2010, social psychologist Julian Holt-Lunstad published an analysis that compiled data from 148 studies, involving more than 308,000 participants. The conclusion was disturbing. Social isolation increases the risk of premature death by 29%, more than obesity, more than a sedentary lifestyle, and almost as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 15 cigarettes a day. That's the impact of social isolation on the human body. And on the brain, the effect is even more direct. A study by the University of California, San Diego, tracked more than 1,600 adults over 60 years of age over 6 years and found that those who identified as frequently lonely were 64% more likely to develop clinical cognitive impairment. Why does loneliness deteriorate the brain? Because the human brain is essentially a social organ. It evolved to function within a network of relationships. When this network is removed or deteriorates, the brain enters a state of chronic stress, producing more cortisol, experiencing more inflammation, and repairing less. Cortisol in high and chronic doses destroys neurons in the hippocampus, precisely the memory region we've already mentioned. It's as if loneliness were a slow-burning fire that gradually consumes the archives of your mind. But the reverse is also true. The Harvard Study of Adult Development, the largest and longest study on human health and happiness ever conducted, begun in 1938 and still ongoing, followed more than 700 men and, subsequently, their sons and daughters. The most cited conclusion of this study: the quality of human relationships is the best predictor of health and longevity. Not wealth, not IQ, not genes, relationships. The current director of the study, Dr. Robert Waldinger, summarizes it this way: the people who were most satisfied with their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80. Satisfied with relationships at 50, healthier at 80. That's the timeline we're outlining for you. But how can we practice this habit effectively? Because having social connections is vague. Neuroscience can be more specific. What protects the brain is not simply being surrounded by people, it's the quality and type of interaction. Research shows that interactions involving active listening, genuine emotional exchange, shared humor, and collaborative problem-solving activate far more brain regions than superficial conversations. In practical terms, this means a weekly 1-hour conversation with a close friend where you actually talk about things that matter is neurologically more valuable than 10 quick, empty interactions. For Americans over 60, researchers have identified 5 especially effective ways to cultivate this habit: participating in an active religious or spiritual group, joining a book club, gardening club, or volunteer group, taking part in a group exercise program, such as a yoga, Tai Chi, or walking group, maintaining regular contact with children, grandchildren, and old friends via video call when in-person meetings are not possible, and adopting or caring for a pet, which research shows to be a powerful modulator of emotional and cognitive health in older adults. Here's a remarkable fact. Adults over 60 who own a dog walk an average of 22 minutes more per day than those who don't. 22 minutes, multiplied by 365 days, that results in a significant amount of exercise and a companion who looks at you with unconditional love every day. The brain registers this, literally. And here's something many people don't consider. Being helpful to others is also a powerful way to protect your brain. When you help someone, when you share knowledge, when you mentor a young person, your brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and suppresses cortisol. It's a chemical exchange that leaves positive marks on the brain's structure. You have decades of experience, accumulated wisdom, and skills that most young people will never have. Offering that in any form is not just generosity, it's neuroprotection. Now that the first 3 habits are established, let's move on to the 4th. And this one will surprise many of you because it involves something you probably consume every day without knowing the impact it has on your brain. Part 4, Feeding the Brain. Habits 4 and 5. Habit 4, Brain Nutrition. What you eat literally builds your brain. Here's a fact most people don't know. Your brain represents only 2% of your body weight, but it consumes 20% of all the energy you ingest. It's the most demanding organ in terms of fuel you possess, and the quality of that fuel largely determines how well it functions. One of the most significant advances in nutritional neuroscience in recent years has been the discovery of the gut-brain axis, the direct connection between the digestive system and the brain, mediated by the vagus nerve and trillions of bacteria that live in your gut. More than 90% of your body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter most associated with well-being and emotional balance, is produced in the gut, not the brain. This means that what you put on your plate directly affects not only your weight or your cholesterol, it affects your mood, your memory, your ability to concentrate, and your risk of developing neurodegenerative diseases. The diet that research most consistently links to brain health in adults over 60 is the MIND diet, a combination of the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, specifically designed to protect the brain. A study published in the Alzheimer's and Dementia Journal showed that following the MIND diet reduced the risk of Alzheimer's by up to 53% in the most rigorous participants, and by 35% even in those who followed it moderately. 35% with moderate adherence. This means you don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. The 10 food groups that the MIND diet prioritizes are dark leafy greens, such as kale and spinach, at least 6 servings per week. Other vegetables, at least 1 serving per day. Nuts, 5 servings per week. Berries, especially blueberries and strawberries, at least 2 servings per week. Beans and legumes, more than 4 meals per week. Whole grains, at least 3 servings per day. Fish, at least once a week. Chicken, at least twice a week. Olive oil as the main fat, and red wine, no more than 1 glass per day, if approved by your doctor. And the 5 food groups to avoid: butter and margarine, less than 1 tablespoon per day. Cheeses, less than 1 serving per week. Red meat, less than 4 meals per week. Fried foods and fast food, less than once a week. Sweets and pastries, less than 5 servings per week. 3 nutrients deserve special attention in this age group. The first is omega-3 fatty acids, found in cold water fish such as salmon, sardines, and tuna, which literally make up the membranes of brain cells and are essential for the efficient transmission of signals between neurons. Research shows that adults over 60 with adequate levels of omega-3 have larger brain volumes, particularly in the regions of memory and cognition. The second are flavonoids, present in dark cocoa, red fruits, and green tea, which stimulate blood flow to the brain and have a direct anti-inflammatory property on neural tissue. A Harvard study with more than 16,000 women showed that those with higher flavonoid consumption aged cognitively up to 2.5 years slower. The third is vitamin D, and here there's a silent crisis. Approximately 41% of American adults are deficient in vitamin D. In adults over 60, that number rises to almost 60%. Vitamin D is directly involved in protecting neurons and regulating proteins that prevent the buildup of plaques associated with Alzheimer's. If you haven't checked your levels yet, ask your doctor at your next appointment. This test can make a big difference. Habit 5. Continuous learning. New neurons at 60, 70, 80 years old. For decades, science taught that humans are born with a fixed number of neurons, and that as we age, they die off without the possibility of replacement. This was the dominant belief until it was overturned. In 1998, researchers at the Salk Institute published a discovery in the journal Nature Medicine that shocked the scientific world. Adult humans generate new neurons throughout their lives, a process called neurogenesis. And the region where this happens most intensely is, once again, the hippocampus, the center of memory. What activates neurogenesis? Exactly the habits we are introducing: physical movement, deep sleep, and, in a particularly powerful way, learning new things. When the brain encounters something genuinely new, a language it has never studied, an instrument it has never played, a game it has never played, a skill it has never practiced, it is forced to create new neural pathways. The engineering of connections kicks in, and this not only creates new memories, it strengthens the brain network as a whole, making it more resilient to decline. Researchers call this cognitive reserve, a kind of buffer that the brain accumulates through years of intellectual stimulation. People with high cognitive reserve can have the same plaques and physical lesions in the brain that cause Alzheimer's in other people, and still function normally because they have alternative neural networks strong enough to compensate. For American adults over 60, researchers identified 5 learning categories with the greatest impact on cognitive reserve. Learning a new language, even partially, even through an app, even without fluency. Learning to play a musical instrument, which activates more brain regions simultaneously than almost any other human activity. Learning a new manual skill, such as carpentry, painting, sewing, or advanced cooking. Playing chess, bridge, or other strategy games regularly. And, surprisingly, teaching something you know to someone else, because the act of organizing and transmitting knowledge is one of the most complete cognitive exercises that exist. The principle is simple. The newer, more difficult, and more multisensory the learning process, the greater the impact on the brain. What challenges you creates growth. What is too easy maintains the status quo. And here's the good news I want you to hear clearly. It's never too late to start. Studies show measurable brain benefits in adults who began learning something new at 70, 75, and 80 years old. The brain doesn't have an expiration date for growth. It does, however, have a point of no return, which is when the decline is already too advanced. But that point is much further away than most people imagine, and the habits we're presenting today create the maximum possible distance between you and that point. Now, let's move on to the 6th and final habit, and this one, in many ways, is what unites all the others. It's the habit that the latest neuroscience points to as the great modulator of brain aging. And it's also, perhaps, the most underestimated of all. Part 5. The habit that unites all others. Stress management. Estimated duration. 10 minutes 1. 650 words. Habit 6. Active management of chronic stress. Let me tell you about Richard. Richard is 67 years old and lives in Phoenix, Arizona. He retired as an engineer after a 35-year career. In theory, his life should have been peaceful. In practice, Richard lived in a state of constant silent stress, worried about his wife's health, his children's finances, political news, and the fear of getting sick. He slept poorly, ate quickly, and avoided social engagements because he felt too exhausted to interact. And he gradually realized that his memory had deteriorated significantly over the past 2 years. Richard didn't have Alzheimer's. He didn't have any diagnosed illness. He had chronic stress, and that chronic stress was eating away at his brain from the inside. Cortisol is the stress hormone. In short, acute doses, like when you brake suddenly to avoid an accident, it's beneficial, even vital. But when the body produces cortisol continuously, over days, months, years, the effect is devastating to the brain. Neuroimaging studies show that chronically elevated cortisol levels cause a physical reduction in the volume of the hippocampus. Yes, the same region that exercise helps to grow. Furthermore, chronic cortisol interferes with the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is essentially the fertilizer for neurons. Without sufficient BDNF, neurons grow less, connect less, and die faster. A study from the University of California, San Francisco, showed that women over 65 with high levels of perceived stress had brains that appeared 4 years older on MRI scans than women of the same age with low stress levels. 4 years of accelerated brain aging, just from stress. But science doesn't stop at diagnosing the problem. It moves on to solutions. And here's some good news for American adults over 60. The most effective and most studied practice for managing chronic stress, with consistent evidence of neuroprotection, is mindfulness meditation. An 8-week mindfulness meditation program, MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, developed by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts, has been shown in neuroimaging studies to produce measurable growth in the prefrontal cortex and a reduction in the density of the amygdala, which is the brain's alarm and fear center. In simple terms, 8 weeks of regular practice literally made the brain calmer, more rational, and less reactive to stress. But if meditation isn't for you, and that's understandable, it's not for everyone, there are other practices with solid scientific evidence. Slow diaphragmatic breathing, which activates the vagus nerve and reduces cortisol in minutes. Yoga, which combines movement, breathing, and mindfulness in a way that is especially effective for adults over 60. Prayer and spiritual practices, which studies show reduce inflammatory markers and improve emotional resilience. And the simple act of writing about worries and emotions, what psychologists call expressive journaling, which research by James Pennybaker at the University of Texas has shown significantly reduces stress activity in the nervous system. A fascinating UCLA study showed that simply putting a negative emotion into words, "I'm scared," "I'm overwhelmed," measurably reduces amygdala activity. Naming the feeling weakens it. This is neuroscience, not philosophy. And here we arrive at the point where the 6 habits intersect, because they are not independent. They reinforce each other in a positive cycle. Intentional physical movement, habit 1. Improves sleep quality, habit 2. Deep sleep reduces cortisol, habit 6. Reduced cortisol facilitates social connection, habit 3. Social connection stimulates learning, habit 5. Learning creates cognitive reserve that makes the brain more resilient to stress, habit 6. Proper nutrition, habit 4, enhances all the others because it gives the brain the fuel it needs to sustain this chain. It's an ecosystem, and like any ecosystem, it functions best when all the elements are present. But contrary to what it seems, you don't need to get all 6 right at once to feel the difference. Research shows that consistently adopting even 3 of these habits already produces measurable cognitive benefits. To make this concrete, here is a weekly protocol based on the 6 habits, adapted for American adults over 60. Monday, 30-minute walk with active observation of the surroundings. In the evening, a video call with someone close. Tuesday, practice your new skill, instrument, language, or other. 20 minutes. Eat at least 1 serving of berries and 1 serving of dark leafy greens. Wednesday, dance class, yoga, tai chi, or other group activity. The social component is mandatory. Thursday, morning walk followed by 10 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing or meditation. Fish for lunch or dinner. Friday, learning activity or volunteering. Involve another person because the social component amplifies the cognitive benefit. Saturday, outdoor activity with morning sun exposure. Meal with family or friends. Sunday, intentional rest. Reading, music, expressing gratitude. Emotional preparation for the week. Bed at the same time as always. And every night, a dark and cool room. No screens in the hour before bed. Every day, without exception. Part 6. Conclusion. The choice that defines the next few years. Remember the story we opened this video with? That moment in the cafe when the restaurant's name didn't come to mind. That split second of silence. That unspoken question that arose in there. For most people, this moment passes, and life goes on. And the moment returns, perhaps in a week, perhaps in a month. A little more frequent, a little longer. But for those watching this video today, that changes. Because now you know that this moment isn't a sentence. It's a signal that the brain is asking for attention. And you learn today how to give it what it needs. Let's quickly recap the 6 habits that neuroscience confirms as protective of the brain after age 60. Habit 1. Physical movement with cognitive intention. 30 minutes, 4 times a week, with active attention to the environment. Prioritize activities that combine body and mind simultaneously. Habit 2. Deep, restorative sleep, consistent schedule, dark and cool environment, no screens before bed, sunlight in the morning. The glymphatic system works for you all night. Let it work. Habit 3. Deep and regular social connection. One meaningful conversation is worth more than 10 superficial ones. Seek out groups, volunteer opportunities, mentorship. Be seen and see others. Habit 4. Intentional brain nutrition, the mind diet as a guide. More dark leafy greens, more berries, more fish, more olive oil. Less processed foods, less sugar, less fried foods. Check your vitamin D levels. Habit 5. Continuously learning something genuinely new. A language, an instrument, a manual skill, a strategy game, or teaching what you know. The discomfort of learning is the sensation of new neurons being formed. Habit 6. Active management of chronic stress, meditation, breathing, spirituality, journaling. Whatever works for you, but do something, because untreated stress is the #1 silent enemy of the aging brain. Returning to Richard, the Phoenix engineer I mentioned earlier. Richard discovered these habits 18 months ago. He started with sleep because it was the most urgent. Then he adopted morning walks. Then he signed up for a beginner Spanish class at the local community center. And he joined a bridge group that meets every Thursday. He didn't do it all at once. He did it one step at a time. And today, 18 months later, he described the change to me with a phrase I won't forget. I feel like I've become myself again. I didn't remember what it was like to be like this. I became myself again. I didn't remember what it was like to be like this. This is what neuroscience makes possible. This is what these 6 habits do, not in theory, but in the real lives of real people. The next 10, 20 years of your life can be lived in 2 ways. In the first form, the decline happens gradually, so slowly that you hardly notice it until it's hard to ignore. Names that disappear, conversations that are lost, independence that slips away. In the second approach, you decide today, not tomorrow, today, to adopt at least 1, 2, 3 of these habits. And they accumulate, and the brain responds, and the cognitive reserve grows. And in 5 years, in 10 years, you'll be one of those people your friends look at and say, "How did you get like this? What are you doing?" And you will know the answer. If this video reached you today, it wasn't by chance. YouTube doesn't deliver this type of content to people who aren't ready to hear it. So let me make a direct request. Choose one of these 6 habits today, just one, and commit to practicing it for 30 days. Just one, just 30 days. And then come tell us in the comments how it went. Because this community, the Top 60 community, is exactly the kind of meaningful social connection that Habit 3 describes. People who are committed to being the best version of themselves. People who believe that 60 is not the end. It's the beginning. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now. Turn on notifications, because in the next videos we'll continue to delve deeper into each of these topics. We'll dedicate entire episodes to each habit, with specific protocols, real-life stories, and interviews with experts. And if you know someone, a friend, a family member, a neighbor who is struggling with memory, isolating themselves, sleeping poorly, and thinking it's just a phase, share this video with them. Because perhaps they don't know there's another way, and you could be the one to show them that way. This is also deep social connection. This is also neuroprotection for you and for those you love. Neuroscience has a favorite word to describe what the brain does when you challenge, nourish, connect, and properly rest it. That word is plasticity. Plasticity means the ability to change, to reorganize, to grow. And contrary to what many believe, this ability has no expiration date. Your brain, yes, yours with its history, with its 60, 65, 70 years, is still plastic, still changing, still growing. The question is simply whether you will direct it to grow in the right direction. And the answer to that question begins today, with a habit, with a choice, with this moment. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about the quality of your mind. Thank you for being part of Top 60, a channel that believes the best version of you is yet to come. See you in the next video, and until then, take care of your brain, because it's the only place you truly live.